record sums on agricultural investments over the coming financial year. Now, they're planning to spend roughly 12 billion Jamaican dollars, which is about 540 million TT dollars. Now, that might seem rather small scale, but given the fact that Jamaica is mostly focused on finance and tourism as their export products, in other words, what brings in foreign exchange and what brings in income to the country, it's rather big news, especially when we compare them to Trinidad and Tobago. Why do I compare them to Trinidad and Tobago? Well, Sean, we had a budget of $1.3 billion last year. Well, that was read last year by the Minister of Finance for fiscal year 2022-2023. $1.3 billion allocated to agriculture. And up until this point, I can't give you any further updates as to precisely what's taking place, other than the fact that if you are able to catch a bag of snails, a crocus bag of snails, then you're probably going to earn yourself some cash for today.
So it's interesting, right? What will be accomplished really with that amount of money that Jamaica is going to be spending? Yes, they are earmarking it for infrastructure projects, but what is the scale of that? Will it really make a difference with regards to their national food output? Will it help them? I don't know. Obviously, I don't think this is going to necessarily just make them food secure overnight, but it could be that they are, like other Caribbean nations, seeing the trends and they don't necessarily want to be prisoner to the moment and caught with their pants down, as disasters tend to cause countries to be. Food security is just one of those strange things, because for decades, the whole thing about globalization was, well, we're specialized, so I might not be the best at making food, so I'll buy my food. But what happens now? What am I supposed to do when something goes wrong and the food supply stops? This could be the start of something, but it could also just be politics as well. They're also putting more investment with regards to their tourism product as well. So it does sound something like what goes on in TNT. Talk about diversification, talk about maybe food security, still reinvest in oil. So I guess for Jamaicans, it's to see how far will this go and what's the follow-up. Just like in Trinidad, when we hear all of the things about diversification, but where's the follow-up after the initial speech or what have you?
Well, I certainly agree with you to an extent. It may be the start of something, you never know, because politics, the story is always changing every single day. But the reason why we're highlighting this story and we're bringing it back to Trinidad and Tobago now is because, as I mentioned, $1.3 billion in terms of agriculture. Now, when you take a look at the Jamaican economy, which, again, as I said, is based heavily off of financial services and tourism, one of their biggest products, interestingly, as part of tourism, Sean, is their local agriculture and local food, which is a big attraction to Jamaica itself. I mean, if you take a look at all these travel shows, they highlight a lot of the local food. And from what I understand, even with respect to big hotel chains, they do try to incorporate as much local as possible. So it is the start of something. So it essentially ties back into their tourism product as well. It goes hand in hand. Comparably to Trinidad and Tobago, when this Dragon Gas deal was actually announced, I think many people celebrated. I celebrated as well. I still have my...
A little less.
I still have my reservations, and I'm waiting, but a valuable point was raised, and that is, does that set us back a little bit in terms of where we were aiming for with respect to agriculture? If I go back to the 2022-2023 budget presentation by Minister of Finance Colin Imbert, he did indicate that government was committed to boosting local production geared towards agro-processing and reducing the reliance on highly processed imported food. He's also said he wants to focus on products, on flour products, alternative flour products that are not wheat-based, obviously. At this point, we're investing almost double, or more than double, what Jamaica is investing in their agricultural product. Where are we? What can we say? This $1.3 billion seems to be nothing more than just a figure that is announced and a campaign that is always touted about. Perhaps recurrent expenditure?
We don't know how it's being spent, and we also don't even necessarily know that the whole $1 billion, 1.3 billion, the allocation is actually making it to the earmarked destination. Because with local governments, they were allocated money before the last budget, and about half of what they were allocated 2 years ago, they essentially, from what I understand, did not receive. The new budget for the new year, the current year, was read, and I believe that more or less wipes out whatever the outstanding is. So now we've reached a point where, okay, is it just that a lot of this money is being spent on grants, on to provide for the food hampers for pandemic relief? Like, we don't know. And to some extent, yes, given buying produce from farmers potentially could help them if cash flow is an issue. Although I'm not necessarily sure that's really a problem per se. Predial larceny, flooding, a whole host of other things, as well as, one could argue, foreign imported food being too cheap could be a whole host of problems that farmers, challenges that they have to deal with. With regards to tourism, I agree with you, because I know more or less, I don't necessarily want to say for a fact, but I'm pretty certain that in Tobago, quite a few tourists, they actually enjoy our local lobster as, like, that's what they're gonna buy as the nice meal, to have the nice dinner in Tobago, to have that big final night before they go abroad. They're not gonna order the imported US steak, unless, this is assuming they have a shellfish allergy. They want the local fish, they want the local seafood, because they can't get that at home. So there is something to be said about fully exploiting local food production. But that also now requires us to take our culture and our local cuisine, one could argue, just a bit more seriously, right? We don't have to formalize it and make it all stiff, but it has to be a bit more. We have to have higher expectations for it, I guess you could say.
I think also, if I may say, tying back into a part of the issue, which is the reliance on heavily imported food and food products. It also ties back into foreign exchange. And on that particular issue, let me raise another point. I understand that job creation is important, and I understand that expanding our markets are important. I will never disagree with that. But for the life of me, I can't understand that, given the fact that we're not in the most favorable positions as it relates to foreign exchange reserves, and the mere fact that it's still very difficult for the common man on the street or the small business owner to get foreign exchange that is necessarily required to operate their businesses. The interesting thing to me is that you have these major businesses, for example, a major coffee chain in Trinidad and Tobago. By the way, the sign is green, so you understand exactly where I'm coming from. That major coffee chain is expanding and popping up almost everywhere now. Yeah, and the thing is, what I can't understand for the life of me is that, is this really what we're pushing for? The interesting thing is that because of the reliance on foreign exchange, or the foreign exchange that goes into opening up just one franchise, each franchise, Sean, I'm sure you're aware of, import napkins, import straws. The majority of their products that are utilized are imported, down to the coffee lids. So I'm questioning this morning, and perhaps I'm an idiot for doing so given the nature of how things are in Trinidad, and we're very much well aware as to what's taking place. But where do our priorities lie? Not only in terms of a nation, in terms of citizens, but also in terms of a governing standpoint. It seems as though they're just those out there whose opportunities come very easy. In fact, you wouldn't even call it an opportunity. You'll just simply call it, go ahead and do as you please.
Well, here's the better reality of the situation. That's a trade and industry question. And agriculture could do just about everything right. I think at some point, if we want to have the diversity of food selection that we have, we're going to still have to be importing certain things. I don't think we could grow coffee here to meet the demands of Trinbagonians, for example. Um, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily the crop I would prioritize. We could grow some things here. We could potentially try to find a cash crop that we could both utilize as well as export. We could try to put as much different crops into the ground, try to have as much different meat production, fisheries, etc. But there will just probably be some things that we will have to import. Food variety is to some extent important for health, so it's not something that I would say we could do without. So we're going to have that problem, but where you could get creative solutions is, like you pointed out, to the napkins, to a lot of the ancillary products. Do you have to import everything? So many things you have to import, I get it, I understand, but you don't have to import everything. And what we could probably have is regulations to prevent the importations of things that we don't need to source from abroad, but that we could produce here. But in order for that legislation to be fair, local production would have to be consistent with regards to quality of those products. Because if I'm a businessman, I don't want to have some second-rate knockoff, whatever, napkin, spoon, whatever, that doesn't work, breaks too easily. I don't want that forced upon me, and then my customers are going to be complaining to me. They're not going to be complaining to some politician on high. So,
and this is where I say, Sean, it goes into it's both aspects that we have to look at. I mean, surely this is not just from a government standpoint that focus has to be. As you just mentioned, you want quality products. There has to be standards that are set and standards that we must practice in order to achieve the best product. Of course, in order to achieve the diversity of products that we currently have, we are going to have to continue to import. The thing is reducing the reliance on that import. I think I've noticed a lot more local products, at least if not on the shelves within the groceries. A lot more local vendors are popping up and trying to ply their trade. The issue is they're not getting the necessary support, because even though subsidies, subventions, and grants are available or made available, the issue is so many other minor things. For example, we've spoken recently to the extent that the allocation of land or the development of land that should be for agriculture is not always put forward towards agriculture. There have been many issues with the predial larceny unit. There have been issues associated with the cost of fertilizers, although I would stress we should also look at organic farming as well as aquaponics. There needs to be high investment in that. I think the issue is really, though people in Trinidad and Tobago may try to take agriculture seriously, and given the fact that there is inflation and a lot more people are looking at their pockets, many a times the real issue is that it's just not taken seriously enough. And there are setbacks, there are drawbacks. I think this dragon gas deal certainly will be a drawback to an extent, because we've never really taken it seriously. And to your example of coffee, maybe coffee is not the product, but we have one product already that I keep seeing and I keep stressing that we could use for a global market, and there is a demand, and that is hot peppers. Our peppers here in Trinidad and Tobago are revered across the world. I keep stressing Japan, Holland, for example, and our cocoa products. If you walk into shops in Germany, if you walk into Selfridges in England, if you walk into these stores, you're going to see our cocoa products on their shelves. So again, there is opportunity and there are markets. We have not been able to exploit it, and for reasons that are probably just known to us but not obvious to others.
I think when our cocoa exporting for industry collapsed way back when, I'm not too sure if politicians or investors are brave enough to say, well, okay, that was then, but this is a different time. What has changed? How could we change the whole industry approach to make it profitable, to find a different way, to target a different niche. Because, again, just look how the world has changed over the last few years. What we took for granted is now, flipped completely upside on its head with basic things, food prices, etc. So it is not, I think, outside the realm of possibility that, yes, cocoa failed way back when and sugarcane failed way back when. But we could figure out ways, especially with things where we have a competitive advantage like cocoa, to make it profitable and to increase the scale of production and make it more widespread. And that could earn us some badly needed foreign exchange.
I'd also prefer to hear a lot more news as it relates to crops in here in TNT and the expansion of the established crop industry or the establishment of crop industries that do not exist. Rather than hearing my minister and my ministers actually, because there's a minister and there's a junior minister telling me about snails in my backyard and how I can get $5 per kilogram. Honestly, I truly wish I heard a lot more. But anyway, I think we have to take a break there, Sean. And when we're soon, we'll continue the conversations this morning. Remember, the only station in the nation that is in HD, except for Sean Michael Small this morning, and you know what? That's absolutely fine. We're okay with that. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Trinidad, come and get blessed at the Good News Fest. Free groceries while stocks last and lots of giveaways like appliances and toys and much more with live music at each venue. 3 days only in South, March 30th at number 4 Recreation Ground, Palo Seco from 4 p.m. In Central, March 31st at Ancient Alley Promenade, Couva, 6 p.m. And in the East, April 1st, Macoya, Savannah, Macoya, 6 p.m. It's the Good News Fest, 3-day family event, March 30th to April 1st. Lots of giveaways after an encouraging word shared.
you for staying with us here on Talking Point as we continue the conversation this morning. We're moving forward now with another matter that is affecting the region, CARICOM. But Trinidad and Tobago is now a part of it, as hinted by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley during a meeting on March 10th, that Mexico actually approached CARICOM member states to be a part of a lawsuit, a US $10 billion lawsuit against 7 gun manufacturers and 1 wholesaler in the United States for the deaths associated, or for the crimes associated and the terrorism acts associated with gun violence. Now, we have news yesterday that Trinidad and Tobago has officially signed onto Mexico's deal to challenge the legal challenge which seeks to hold these private US gun manufacturers to account for their creating a flow of arms and ammunition into the region. Other CARICOM nations, including Jamaica, the Bahamas, Antigua and Barbuda, have already signed the case, which is currently being pursued in the US courts. It seems as though government had, they've had about 2 weeks, which isn't a lot of time actually when making a decision such as this. But Sean, is it that this is something that we're monitoring it closely? But is it something that we're seeing as perhaps a scapegoat for government's responsibilities? Is it pressures from other CARICOM member states having to join? Or is this the right thing, the necessary thing for Trinidad and Tobago to do?
This is not an easy situation because essentially what we're saying, or at least potentially, is that, hey, America, your internal laws are affecting us, so we need you to change it. And to some extent, for one nation to more or less say that is stepping out of bounds. People complain all the time when America tells other nations what to do. And it doesn't really make it better if you just reverse the direction. The flip side is there is practical considerations. Guns are making it throughout the Caribbean, Mexico, etc. And we've seen the use now last year of what automatic fire long guns could do in just a few instances, a few cases. We haven't even necessarily seen the full extent of the carnage that could be unleashed on the people of TNT if things get even further out of hand. So, on one hand, I get it, because getting a gun is technically easier. However, this is what's difficult as well. You're not necessarily supposed to be able to get automatic rifles that easily just off the shelf from a gun manufacturer. So potentially, America does have laws in place to prevent the ease of these weapons getting into the hands of criminals. There's a whole lot of things to consider. To what extent is it that, well, America just needs to enforce its laws better? But then how do you demand a country potentially do that? Just do a better job. Assuming that they're, acting in good faith and doing everything reasonable to ensure that illegal guns aren't smuggled from their country into other countries. So I'm not necessarily comfortable with this, because the other thing is, just take the ideological or the principled discussion part of it to the wayside. Politically speaking, it's not just CARICOM nations that also lend their support. 16 U.S. states plus the District of Columbia, I believe, all Democrat-controlled states have also joined in on the lawsuit. CARICOM, Caribbean nations, file a separate amicus brief to the U.S. states. So it's an internal political issue. And I'm also very wary about that, about essentially declaring for a side. Now, granted, yes, we're technically declaring for Mexico, but to what extent now are we wading into what I would say is muddied U.S. waters, where the politics around gun ownership and the legality of buying and selling guns, etc.,
But sure,
that is a whole next level of politics that we don't want to be involved in. It's just not something that I'm comfortable with.
Let me intervene here, because the United States, surely, yes, it has its issues right now with gun control legislation and with lobbying for gun control legislation, and the entire issue surrounding, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, the amendment as it relates to the right to bear arms. Yes, it's a very unfortunate, and I say nasty political issue that is taking place within the United States, amongst other things. But putting that notion aside for a moment of Democrats and Republicans, because I could see the point that you're trying to make. This particular issue, focusing solely on the region and with microscopic view of Trinidad and Tobago, whom do we actually sue if this is the case? Sorry, before I get to that question, I just have to let you know that this case has already been dismissed. This is an appeal now taking place. We're now joining the appeal, so just bear that in mind. Who is it that Trinidad and Tobago sues for the flow into Trinidad and Tobago for drugs, for the flow of Trinidad and Tobago of migrants that are then taken into prostitution? Who do we sue for these things? I think whilst there is an issue with other countries not controlling what is coming out of their borders, we have an issue here in Trinidad and Tobago of not being able to control or secure what is coming into our borders. And I think that right there is an argument why this lawsuit in itself is going to be very tricky, especially for Trinidad and Tobago not having the best national security apparatus to deal with these situations.
And this goes back to now, one of the interesting things with gun control in the States, a lot of people will say, look, there was a shooting, we need more gun control. But what tends to be just as often as not is the fact that the gun used in some mass shooting event was already illegal to the person that had it. So more gun control literally would do nothing unless you're going to essentially just try to get rid of guns in the United States, which to some extent is not just virtually impossible, but it's also practically impossible. The US is not just limited to big cities. They also have a large amount of rural communities which not only enjoy sport shooting, but also to some extent, you know, it's actually a requirement because of just the dangers of the wilderness that they're in. Now, who do we sue? We're on the outside looking. Who do we sue when potentially all of the legal reasonable protections might be there? Well, the argument that we're making, from what I understand, that is to say the CARICOM nations together with their separate brief, is that, look, however the distribution, the sales practices of the manufacturers, and I believe there's one gun distributor in the lawsuit. This is Mexico's lawsuit. We're just basically adding an amicus brief. We are not necessarily direct parties to the lawsuit, but we have pertinent information for the lawsuit. They're going after the gun manufacturers and in one gun distributor to say, well, look, how they do business.
My apologies. I'm going to have to actually cut you there because we have to actually take a quick break right now. My apologies, but we will continue this conversation a bit later on here on Talking Point. We'll be right back after this.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch ultra-slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Trinidad, come and get blessed at the Good News Fest. Free groceries while stocks last and lots of giveaways like appliances and toys and much more with live music at each venue. 3 days only in South, March 30th at number 4 Recreation Ground, Palo Seco from 4 p.m. In Central, March 31st at Ancient Alley Promenade, Couva, 6 p.m. And in the East, April 1st, Macoya, Savannah, Macoya, 6 p.m. It's the Good News Fest, 3-day family event, March 30th to April 1st. Lots of giveaways after an encouraging word shared.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back to Talking Points here on WESN Content Capital. Sean Michael Small is with us still via Zoom. Sean, my apologies for having to interrupt you earlier while you were making your points, but please continue now.
Right. So what I was saying is they're going after the manufacturers. The idea is to get them to do business better, to get a court order if necessary from the district judge, the district court, to say, look, you need to do these things in a much more responsible way to try to prevent the guns from trickling down, not just in TNT, but of course other Caribbean nations are seeing it as well. The thing is, and it goes back to where you started off, and we technically already had this discussion when we first heard about this a couple of weeks ago. To what extent can we really hold the US and US gun manufacturers culpable for things smuggled into our country? And I think, first of all, then to what extent is US going to hold us accountable for being a transshipment point? Just like how I expectant on the political level for the US to hold Mexico accountable for fentanyl or whatever illegal substance is coming across the borders from Mexico to the US.
Yeah,
now,
so this is the thing, Sean. I think, and that's the point that really ties back into what was said earlier with respect to with all that is happening here in TNT. With respect to all that is inflowing illegally, we have not actually done anything enough to try and ourselves help the situation. And though people might suggest that is unfair criticisms, I mean, we've already heard from the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force about the operation of their vessels. One is in dry dock. We don't know how long that is going to be out. We've already heard with respect to them that they had 2 vessels operating over the pandemic. They gave an example of 7 vessels trying to come in. So it's a lot, but let's just pause on that for a moment, because you can't see it as yet, but alongside you in Zoom, we are actually pleased to welcome to the program this morning to join us once more, Opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshminiyal. Good morning, Opposition Senator.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks.
Well, let's start the conversation. Actually, funny enough, I just mentioned the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and their parents before, the GSC. Speaking, I spoke about what they mentioned with respect to the Coast Guard apparatus, but there was greater focus on what was being said with respect to the internal audit over ammunition, given the fact that at least 5 crime scenes last year showed evidence of Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force ammunition being used in whatever crime was taking place. Now, according to this internal audit, 95% has already been completed, but they've accounted for everything thus far. I mean, do you trust an internal audit from these organizations? I certainly don't.
Well, I was extremely shocked. So, context, the Defense Force appeared before the Joint Select Committee because the opposition members of that committee, which would be myself and Dr. Rodal Monilal, wrote a letter to the chairman specifically identifying the issue of ammunition being found. And I actually articulated in that letter and hyperlinked all of the articles in the newspaper and all of the incidents where it was either Coast Guard, Air Guard, or regiment markings being found on spent shells at crime scenes. And I said, listen, this is crazy. We need to we need to have something done. On the 29th of December, at a Christmas function, the minister was asked about it, and then the Defense Force issued a statement saying that, look, they have a very strict system in place and everything like that. And on the 3rd of January, less than a week later, there was another incident. So we summoned them there to question them. And in the course of the questioning, yes, they told us that there was an internal audit. It's 95% complete, but they feel almost certain that all of their ammunition is accounted for. I questioned them about the process of managing and checks and balances for ammunition, the way it is done in the TTPS, for example, when you have a handover and all of that, from one shift to the next, that you account for the number of guns and bullets and so on that's present. And, they were very confident that they have a system in place. So it is alarming. So on the one hand, you have to ask yourself, well, can we trust an internal audit? I have no reason to believe that persons would be trying to, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but something is definitely, as I said, something is rotten in the state of Trinidad and Tobago. It is either something is wrong with the internal audit or something is wrong with what the TTPS is reporting about what they find. And there's a simple solution to this. And this is the most troubling part to me, is that I found that these two organizations have not been speaking to each other as much as I would like. So I've been told, and we were told at the JSC, well, we're here to assist the TTPS. the week before, 2 weeks before, when we had the TTPS present and we questioned them about forensic examination of spent shells and so on, they were very much, you know, I don't want to say boastful, but they were very positive. And they were very convincing when they said that, look, we have new systems in place so that we can quickly retrieve spent shells and ammunition and complete the evidence recovery through what they call CIRU, which speeds up the process so that we don't have that backlog at forensics in terms of recovering evidence from spent shells and so on. I have articles as far back as August last year reporting about Defense Force markings being found on ammunition. And to date, it does not appear that the TTPS has spoken to the regiment and has have communicated to them what has been found in terms of evidence recovery from these spent shells. The regiment indicated that they have batch numbers on these on the ammunition and so on, and I don't know that there has been a match back of what has been found with what the regiment documentation is. And that to me is the troubling part, because you say you have systems and processes in place, and yet there's simply, 4 or 5 months going by, and we're not seeing people properly using the systems and analyzing the issue to put an end to this. It may very well be that there's just a flaw in your system somewhere that's causing this ammunition to get into the hands of criminal elements, and you need to plug that hole ASAP. Like as in last year. So, we are approaching March. We are approaching, I think it's 130-something murders for the year. And, persons basically getting easy access to ammunition through our law enforcement, or the thought that law enforcement may be complicit and cooperating with criminal elements. It paints a very scary picture for the public. So that's I think that this matter should be treated with absolute urgency. And that does not appear to be happening.
Well, Senator, I want to make sure I didn't mishear you. I think you said that in the actual Joint Select Committee hearing or meeting, the Chief of the Defense Force said that the audit was 95% complete and not actually finished.
Yeah, the Inspector General said the report was 95% complete, but he said from what the visits that they were doing and so on and whatever, he said their ammunition is accounted for. That was very definitively said that the report and so on is 95% complete, but they were very, very confident that all of their ammunition was accounted for.
Because my issue is 95% complete is not 100% complete. And
correct.
We're talking, I would assume, tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition have to be accounted for, but you only need 1 bullet or 2 bullets on the crime scene to be a problem.
And it's funny because they actually said that, in the Army, we say a bullet is a life, 1 bullet is a life. So if 1 bullet is missing, that's a possible threat against a life. So yeah, you have to be that meticulous when it comes to it. But again, I pulled the reports, which are from the media, because we don't have access to the police reports. Yeah. But of course, we assume that it's informed by police reports, official police reports. And I mean, on one particular scene, there was 7 spent shells found with markings, something. So there's definitely a large amount of ammunition carrying these markings that's out there. I feel like if you were to sit and analyze the operations of any organization, it's very easy to see where you may have a lapse. I've been thinking a lot about it. I literally would be outside watering my plants and be thinking about this. You have contractors, for example, who operate on the ranges, who may be doing things. You have people who would sign out for ammunition and say that they're going to shoot on the range for practice, which they're entitled to do or not. Does anybody check? If you take 1,000 bullets and you go out on the range to practice or whatever, are you required to pick up the 1,000 spent shells and return them? So how do you know you're actually shooting them? There's so many things. If you sit and you analyze the movement, and I don't know, to me this is common sense, but I don't know that is being done. The other thing is, I understand, and this actually came to me from a member of the public who I'm related to, literally just picked up the phone and said, hey, I saw this thing on the news. There's an expiry date sometimes on ammunition.
Yes,
I did not know this, and I would have to ask this question later on. From the Defense Force when we have an opportunity again. But I understand that at a certain point in time, they would dispose of live rounds of ammunition for one reason or the next. and that is a function that may be contracted out. So, could that be the possible leak? Do we have areas in the entire operation where you have a leak of ammunition, or you have opportunities being created for people to take ammunition, live ammunition, and sell it to the criminals? And so that's the type of analysis that I would expect.
Well, Senator, I agree with you. I think about this all the time as well. It concerns me. I mean, we all have sisters, brothers. We all have, family members out there that we're concerned every time that you hear murder takes place. But it's even more worrisome that the protective services, there seems to be something going on there. I can't point out fingers, but something odd is going on there. You see, ammunition does have a shelf life. If I'm not mistaken, if it is stored under ideal conditions, I think most ammunition could last for about 10 years if it's stored under ideal conditions. And the thing is, given the fact that the army is now out policing the streets and whatnot, you would think that the ammunition will have to be disposed of. With all that being said, 95% complete. I can't even be sure. I can't take their word of mouth. I can't be certain that it's, 95% complete. That can just be a ballpark figure. In fact, I'm not even sure if some of them could count, if I'm being honest with you. Not trying to be disrespectful, but being absolutely honest.
Right, and all of this points to something, and I'll maybe comment what you first said about people thinking about it. Yes, I agree, and that's why I said the urgency of the matter is so important, because it's one thing to feel like you have gangs and you have criminals, in the country, but it's another thing altogether, and there's another level of fear from citizens when you think that law enforcement may be part of it, because the people who you believe or who ought to be in a position to protect you could actually be the ones contributing to the problem. That's a whole next level of fear among the citizens, and that's what we're picking up. Of course, that part of our role is to interact with the public and constituents and so on for those who have constituents. And that's what we've been picking up, that, listen, if you can't trust the police and the army, who have access to perhaps unlimited caches of guns and ammunition, then we are just, we are going to hell in a handbasket. And that's why we felt this was so urgent. The second point I want to make is that coming out of all of this, to me, points in one direction, and that is some sort of an independent audit. But who do you get to independently audit our defense force? Who do we get to independently go? And again, it's not a matter of sitting down and saying, well, I'm supposed to have 100,000 bullets, I'm going to sit down and count 100,000. It's a matter of, well, these pen shells with the markings came from somewhere. Is it that somebody put in markings, and why would they be doing that? Is it that, the batch numbers are different? Is there a mismatch in terms of your process and your records? Is somebody falsifying
Senator,
records?
all
of this
at this
should be
GSC
done.
meeting,
Not just count bullets.
At this GSC meeting, did they give any indication as to how they went about accounting for the bullets, how they go about storing the bullets and taking records of ammunition that is kept, ammunition that is purchased? Did they give any idea as to their science behind this entire situation?
No, we didn't really get the opportunity to drill down that deeply, but I certainly will. And I already communicated this to my colleague, that we do have to bring them back together, I think, with the police to question them about these things, because police ammunition has also been found and other paraphernalia in terms of crime scenes and so on. But I think that we do have to drill down into that. But I also believe that the first step is the forensics on those pen shells and the match back. So I don't know if it is that as parliamentarians we are required to get these two sets of people into the room and be like, could you kindly talk to each other and work this out? But if that's what we have to do, that's what we're going to have to do.
Well, that leads me to the bigger point that I've been holding back on, and that is with regards to cooperation between the services. You mentioned it as well, Senator. And from what we understand, there's a rivalry going on. I find it interesting that the one case of the Coast Guard intervening on the breach of public safety regulations just happened to be the former commissioner's head of legal for the TTPS, right? The one case that we have in the news. And Gamma variant came through, right? We have illegal immigrants coming through while the borders are locked down, but that's the one thing we hear about. So now we've reached the point where we could bring them in together. I think people call for the Army and the Coast Guard to help the police. Of course, border security is its own thing, but just on the street to have the additional manpower, which That's its own kettle of fish when you get people trained for soldiering as opposed to trained for policing on the street. But I think, will the Joint Select Committee look into this with regards to these services not necessarily cooperating? Because part of it too is who's going to do the audit. Well, potentially a police investigation is really what would be required at this stage into the missing ammunition, and that and all might be something of a almost volatile situation given the potential state.
And the thing about it is that this issue of a police investigation is ongoing. I'm so sick of hearing that, because it really doesn't just drag on, but it also is like used as a way to block anything else from taking place. So you want to ask very probing questions through the parliament and through the committees or even the media or whoever, and the answer that you are blocked with is it's an ongoing police investigation. Well, how long? As I said, I have articles as far back as August last year, and I am not yet hearing about the forensics and so on. You know, it's interesting. You talk about border security, right? And one of the things that I just sat there and I told myself, God, like, where are we going? You know, and that's how I felt sitting in that committee. I asked a question about cooperation between the Coast Guard and I think somebody else asked it, the Coast Guard and the police, marine, riverine unit that they set up or whatever it was. Basically, the Coast Guard is responsible for the borders, the seas. And this unit was meant to deal with when they enter our territorial waters and they're coming up, because everybody knows the guns, the ammunition, the illegal immigrants, the drugs, they enter and they use these, illegal points of entry. One senator mentioned the river that comes up by the Felicity cremation site and so on. And I asked the Defense Force, I said, well, since you've been collaborating with this unit, how many patrols have you done? And how much has been seized? How much has been taken? I think, they could have told us when was the last time they went on one. They said they'll provide the information about how many patrols they did, but they didn't know. They did not know if anything was actually seized. So what they do and what they describe is that they will basically man the waters outside. If somebody comes in, the police have to sweep in and get them. But imagine that there's so little communication between these two sets of people who are supposed to be working together that one doesn't know if, these people that we spotted out the road, they're out in the ocean, and we tell them, they're coming your way. When you arrested them or pounced on them in the river or whatever, we don't know if you actually find anything. What? I mean,
A quick last question before we're out of time. With regards to, it's one thing if we have a TTPS media ambassador and we're told ongoing investigation, we're members of the media. Now, the Joint Select Committee on National Security, I would assume potentially could be vetted, all of the individual members, to be given some sort of security clearance, because in the States, a committee such as this committee would be able to have closed door interviews.
And we can do that as well. But
so, because, I would just like, obviously, if the politicians could ask the questions,
Sean,
I don't need to know the details.
We're
I just need the assurances that
we do have
things are happening.
We do have the power to have closed door meetings in camera sessions if it's a sensitive matters of a national security thing. So like sometimes you're talking about certain security arrangements, you'll have that. But this wasn't a case like that. And still I find that the ongoing police investigation type answer is still put forward. I would love the opportunity to be able to properly, I would say, cross-examine some of these people. And unfortunately, committees don't work like that. In fact, I think I am usually reined in my questioning because I tend to go that way in terms of a real thorough cross-examination.
We're going to have to pause it there.
I do believe that something more probing has to be done. Some more probing questions have to be asked.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Senator. We appreciate you joining us on Talking Point this morning. And, well, listen, we're not entirely confident that the Coast Guard and the Defense Force are doing their job. I hope that the opposition remains on this, and I hope that the opposition continues to highlight these things and not just let it die due to a two-day memory here in TNT. But thank you for your presence here this morning on Talking Point.
Thanks again for having me. Take care. Have a good day.
Folks, we break for news on the hour, and when we return, well, we'll continue this morning's program.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Man gunned down in Marbella. Opposition leader accuses Prime Minister of reusing UNC original plans as his own. Investigations into illegal quarrying continue. And internationally, US raises interest rates despite banking turmoil. Now for the details. One man is dead following a gun attack in Marbella on Tuesday. Reports say 39-year-old Anthony Singh was at his West Bay Road home when he heard someone call out his name. When he went outside, he was shot in the head by a gunman. Singh was rushed to the San Fernando General Hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. Opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar has accused Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley of doing a copy and paste by reintroducing UNC programs under new names 8 years after destroying the laptop, Smart Classroom, eConnect and Learn programs, as well as the Ministry of Science and Technology. In a statement, Persad-Bissessar said that 8 years after needlessly and spitefully shutting down the programs the former UNC government put in place to transform the education system and prepare students for the digital age, the Rowley government is now finally adopting a policy of incorporating digital technology in education. She said that it is unfortunate that hundreds of thousands of young people have been left 8 years behind, and the digital divide has widened due to Rowley's malice and desire to malign the policies of the former government. Investigations into illegal quarrying are continuing. Director of Minerals at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, Monty Bihari, spoke on the issue at a Public Accounts Committee meeting in Parliament on Wednesday.
There have been persons, based on complaints received of illegal quarrying, that were investigated, caught in the act, and the TTPS officers are currently dealing with those persons.
In international news now, the U.S. Central Bank has raised interest rates again, despite fears that the move could add to financial turmoil after a string of bank failures. The Federal Reserve increased its key rate by 0.25 percentage points, calling the banking system sound and resilient. But it also warned that fallout from the bank failures may hurt economic growth in the months ahead. The Fed has been raising borrowing costs in a bid to stabilize prices. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
But if we died with Christ, we have faith that we will also live with him. We know that Christ has been raised from the dead, and he will never die again. Death no longer has power over him. He died to sin once and for all with his death, but he lives for God with his life. Join WESN as we explore the death and resurrection of Christ with He is Risen, a perspective from bearing leaders within the Christian faith. He is Risen, starting March 27th, only on WESN, the content capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Well, Welcome back to Talking Point. Thank you very much to Mr. Denise Martin for news on the hour. And let me thank Sean as well for news earlier. You're well done, Sean. Anyway, as we continue the conversation this morning, ladies and gentlemen, this happens sometimes. So we're just pausing on the phone calls this morning as we welcome to the program Mr. Paul Leacock. He's the representative, local government representative for Bonaire, if I'm not mistaken, Bonaire Aruka, sorry. Bonaire Aruka Game Farm, right? Yes. Well, Mr. Leacock, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I will enjoy the opportunity, and I hope that I could bring some clarity to any of the issues that we discuss. And let me say good morning, of course, to your guest and to your listenership.
Well, thank you very much. So, hopefully you can give me some clarity. If, focusing solely on local government and local government elections, which you last year, the terms for local government representatives, councillors, were actually extended by a year. There's a debate going on there, of course. In the courts, the local appeal courts actually shut down a case that was brought forward by activist Ravi Balgobin Maraj. She's decided to take it to the Privy Council, and last week the Privy Council says even though they understand that this is a case that is very much needs to be handled with a sense of urgency, they also need to take their time to deliberate what is constitutionally and legally allowed, given the nature of the case and the elections. I mean, it all took us by surprise, extending it by a year. I mean, what was the government's justification or reasoning? Because even up to now, I'm not entirely sure I understand it.
Well, we have come to the population with the issue of local government reform, and on two occasions. And the reform and the bills that are attached to the reform have took some time in order to ensure that it was what we needed to carry it forward. Because the issue of reform has been on the agenda since 1990. As a matter of fact, there have been 2 or 3 attempts to reform before. So the fact is that it took some time to get the quality of legislation that you needed to make local government possible. And now that we at this point, the thinking was that you would roll out an extra year to give the preparation so that when you go into the next, and councillors are supposed to be full-time, or members of council are supposed to be full-time, they would be well prepared, and of course some of the resources needed would be ready.
Well, it took about 31 years to get to that status of quality. Rushing just before local government elections were to be called does not necessarily add up to me saying that, listen, we need another year to fully implement this. Why is it that elections could not have been called, and then following the elections, then we go ahead with this? Okay, following these elections, terms will be extended by a year. Wouldn't that have made more sense?
Well, following the election,
the
term would be 4 years.
Due last year, yes.
It would automatically be 4 years. Yeah. I can't speak to why, to that choice, but I can explain that it was one of many choices, and the government felt that it was the best choice to start somewhere. Because we can always say where to start and when to start, but the fact is you have to start somewhere. And this was a good opportunity to start.
And fair point, but is it just...
And as a councillor, I've been a councillor for 9 going on 10 years. And I am as anxious as all my other colleagues on both sides in TPRC and I think across the country to get it started.
Would you suggest, well, I don't think you would be of what you're telling me, but it does come across to me as an individual, just as an ordinary citizen, as well as an analyst, that it was an opportunity for another year for an extended campaign. That is what, and for both sides, not just the side of the government, but it's an opportunity for both sides to campaign and perhaps solidifies the government's position within local government, given that the elections are, of course. Yeah.
If I accept that position, let's look at some facts. We have 14 corporations, 7 are P&M controlled, 7 are UNC controlled. And it's been that way for the majority of the 10 years that I've been a councillor. And very often you go back to the polls and it comes back to a close result, 8-6, 6-8, etc. So I don't believe that delaying it another year extends the campaign. And if it does, then it gives each side an equal opportunity. So again, while we could debate why the decision was made, I think the real issue is that there was an opportunity to get the thing started.
Do you think that the citizens of Trinidad understand the necessity of local government reform, and perhaps do you think it's been explained to them enough so that they have a better understanding of why this is necessary? Because you mentioned since the 1990s, this is something that has been required. It has been delayed for what, about 30 years. You think the people of Trinidad are accepting that this is what is necessary?
Yes. I think they too recognize that local government can be one of your most powerful tools. In some parts of the world, local government is government. As a matter of fact, there's a very cliche kind of saying that suggests that, that level of government on the ground is what is important. And the fact is that it gives us access to the people with the issues that affect the people the most. You might think paving, for instance, well, is an opportunity for a contractor to make $1. But the fact is the size of a particular pothole causes damage to somebody's vehicle, which is an investment in their lives. A play park, how do you de-stress when you leave, when you reach back home from work, or how do you deal with lifestyle diseases, your play park, your exercise equipment, the opportunity to go out and walk, take your children out of the house, etc. All those affected by local government. And of course, the extension of local government activity to things like schools, repairs of schools and government buildings in and around the region. And of course, all the other areas where local government will be able to intervene in the community. And having a source of funds to do so gives power to the Burgess. So I think while there's a lot more that we can share with Burgess for them to understand how powerful local government can be, I think that the majority of the citizens understand that this reform is the start of bringing the power to them to make some significant contribution to the choices that we make at local government.
So citizens didn't necessarily have that power before to make those significant choices?
Well, they could contribute. For instance, I met with a community council this week. And of course, the things that we discuss, so for instance, simple things like the basketball court, what to do with the rims, how to change the backboard, the court needed brightening so it could encourage people to stay out a little later. Bonnie has a lot of activity now. The Police Youth Club has brought out hundreds of young people. How do we engage TNTech or public lighting to ensure that maybe we get the lights on longer? So those things exist now. But to have these sources of funds, for instance, that will allow local government to then follow up on the decisions discussed at the community level is a significant change, because we then get to generate a lot of our own funding. As it is now, for instance, the vending solution in Tacarigua, Eddie Hart, I'm sure that you may have visited it or at least heard of it. That generates a significant amount of revenue. But there's a lot more that can be generated at the local level that empowers us to help our Burgess differently.
So I think the biggest argument is that this is going to lead to improved services and the improved quality of life. Why? The main issue here has been funding. That's the argument that I'm hearing.
Yes.
Is there a reason beyond the fact that property tax probably was paused? It was always there. It was just paused, more or less. Is that the main reason why local government services have not been improved? Because again, forgive me if I sound as though I'm going all over the place, but it's just the arguments that have been put forward, and I'm trying to get a reasoning and an understanding as to why all this is taking place now in this time.
Now, if you look at the suite of legislation, it includes some amendments to the legislation that deals with local health authority. It includes a whole suite of smaller things, municipal, police, etc. All of those act together to bring service closer to the burghers. So for instance, at most corporations outside of the cities and the boroughs, we have just public health inspector, public health officers. There's room for a public health inspector. At the boroughs and cities, they have the public health inspectors. And the roles make a little difference in the ability to enforce. So as this now, for instance, for TPRC to go into a property that's overgrown, we have to get the public health group to go and investigate it first. And through a committee called the CMOH, County Medical Office of Health Committee, to which our CEO is the secretary, you then have to get a directive to go and clean the same property. When the property in your space, if you have control over all of the officers who are involved in that process, and you can directly instruct them to take particular actions once they're within the law, then you go in and you do it for yourself, and you save the burgess a couple of weeks of waiting, sometimes months of waiting, to get a property next to them that's overgrown and unoccupied cleaned. Or maybe occupied and where the burgess doesn't respond. Simple things like inspection of premises. Most inspection of food premises takes place during the day because there's no arrangement for overtime.
But are these services taking place now? Because I have to
during the day, but we would like to have some inspection during the night, because a lot of the activity that takes place in terms of food, especially street food, happens in the night.
I think it's even more interesting to me that, I mean, one observation that I've made outside one local government representative's office is that there's so much taking place right in front of the office, and yet many times you don't even see the councillor, know where the councillor is, or you can't get in contact with the councillor except when the campaign starts, vote for me. The issue being is that even now, when things can be done, even now as we speak, when things can be done, you don't necessarily see it being done. Now, don't get me wrong, there's often a lot more to the story behind closed doors than what we are aware of. But perception could sometimes equal to reality.
So part of that, for instance, is making sure that your councillor is available on a full-time basis. And local government reform, there's another major pillar, that the councillors will be full-time. As this now, when I leave here, I go to my substantive job. And it means that during the hours that I should dedicate to that job, I also have to take calls that are associated with local government. If I am available whole day, and as my job as a councillor, an elected councillor, maybe even a secretary of a particular division, then I can respond all the time to calls, and we would expect a sharp increase. Even now, most councillors are committed, but they also have to survive. So a lot of them have other commitments that help them to survive.
Certainly. Well, let's take one quick call from Shagonas. Good morning, caller. All right. Actually, okay. We think we've lost that caller there. Oh, Mr. Leacock. So I mean, everything that you're telling me sounds all well and good. I mean, this sounds very good, and I'm hopeful for it. The issue is now, one thing that we failed for here in TNT is implementation.
Correct.
How am I confident, or how could you inspire me to be confident? And listen, we guarantee this is going to be fully implemented, and we guarantee you're going to see improved services, a better quality of life, a better standard of life, and a lot more being done.
Well, part of change management, and right now the reform is in the hands of the change management consultants, and of course, we hope soon to be directly involved in the final steps to get it going. Part of the change would be that you need to put performance indicators in place and measure it as you go along. You need to put clear markers about where you're going next, what needs to be done. So for instance, if you're going to introduce 8 secretaries with about 10 divisions, you need to find office space for the secretary, for the directors of the particular divisions, for the staff that's supporting them. You need to find the resources to ensure that they could move, they could mobilize, they could respond. Yeah. So when you put those clear plans in place, You have your strategic goals in place. You now have to now put clear, and now I'm a HR consultant. So you put clear performance indicators and you measure if in fact you're achieving it. And if not, what do you do quickly to adjust and ensure that you get things done? And this can't be pie in the sky, high talk. It has to be practical things that get you, that ensure that you're delivering to Burgess. Because Burgess really are only concerned with how does your representation impact their living. And that's where we have to ensure. I mean, it's been a challenge. There was one author who says that it's easy to come up with strategic plans, but the real challenge is implementation, and that's an author in 1970 or something.
Well, Mr. Lecoq, I must say it's been a pleasure talking to you, sir. I want to thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning, and we will certainly be keeping an eye out as to more that is taking place. We still have that case before the Privy Council that is due to be heard. So when that happens, maybe we can further this discussion.
Of course, and in the meantime, we continue to do the work and do everything possible to ensure that we implement and not talk local government reform.
That's a very fine way to conclude it. Excellent, sir. Well, thank you very much. That's Mr. Paul Lecoq, the representative for Bonnet, Aruka, and Canefield. Correct me if I'm wrong again. Cane Farm. There you go, you see. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for Talking Point this morning. Sean actually just sends his well wishes to everybody. He had a couple of things to get done, but you will see him again tomorrow morning. Thank you very much to our directors. And folks, listen, today is a good day to have a good day, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.